Let's talk today about how the CMMC assessment methods guarantee fraud rather than ensure the proper cybersecurity of controlled, unclassified information.
Hello everybody, I'm deep inside the Hollow Earth, and that is where Godzilla and King Kong fight. I have to be in deep hiding today for what I'm about to tell you, otherwise they will kill me. We're going to talk about why the CMMC assessment methods will guarantee fraud, not cybersecurity, improvements, not security, but fraud. Let's get right into it.
What I'm going to be talking about today is related to the CMMC assessment method. Now, remember this, CMMC certifications are going to be required if you want to bid on any contract within the defense industry, right? There are millions upon billions of dollars of contracts that are hanging out there, and if you don't get CMMC, allegedly, you won't be able to even bid on them, never mind be awarded them. So a lot of money's in the mix, and that means it's ripe for fraud, and I'm going to show you why the CMMC assessment method almost guarantees that level of fraud, and we're not going to be able to trust the resulting certifications that come out of it. The CMMC assessment method is based on this document, NIST Special Publication 800-171A. It was written by a guy named Ron Ross along with Kelly Dempsey and Victoria Pelletieri. They're not listening to outside parties, okay? I've tried to tell them there's a flaw in this document that's carrying over to CMMC. Now, there's a couple reasons that might be. It could be that they didn't write this for CMMC, all right? So maybe they don't care if CMMC corrupts it. But there's a hint here that I'll show you that suggests that they are listening. They're just making corrections that are going to make it worse. I think there's some ego at play here. I think that this is their baby, and they're very proud of their work. A little bit of hubris going on there, and they're not going to edit it. But anyway, let's look into it. So NIST 800-171, and we're currently at Rev A. What does it require? It says that there are 3 potential assessment methods that can be applied when doing a cybersecurity assessment of your CUI, your controlled unclassified information. These 3 methods are examine, interview, and test. All right, and I want to look at each one of these. Now, this carries over to CMMC. So this wasn't written for CMMC, but CMMC is using this method to conduct its assessments. All right, these 3 methods here. The first one is examine, and that is reviewing, studying, inspecting, observing, or analyzing assessment objects, meaning records and documents. Okay. Interview means holding discussions, obviously with individuals or groups about the assessment objects. So you're having you're getting verbal testimony. And the third one is testing. That's exercising those assessment objects under specified conditions to compare actual with expected behavior. So you have these 3 options when you're assessing each one of the controls or any other part of the CMMC standard. You have these 3 methods that you can choose from. Now, here's the thing. NIST SP 800-171 is written for self-assessments. Now, if you talk to NIST, they'll back off on that, but when you read the actual text, it is written from the perspective of that you're testing yourself, okay? And it says, organizations are not expected to employ all the assessment methods, okay, contained herein. Rather, organizations have the flexibility to determine the level of effort needed and the assurance required for the assessment. So you see, that's the language that points to this being a self-assessment. You, the organization, are reading this and deciding what level of rigor you're going to apply. It says, this determination is based on how the organization can accomplish the assessment objectives in the most cost-effective manner. And there's some other stuff about confidence. But I want to say cost-effective, right? This was the original text from 171. You see that circle up top? This was before it was revised. This was the original revision. This language appeared in here. I wrote to Ron Ross and I said, this is terrible. It can't be applied to CMMC, as I'm about to tell you. Then they released Rev A, and they took it out. The paragraph just disappears. They didn't add any language clarifying that no, in the case of self-assessments, you can do this. They just took it out. So, and they also didn't say now that 800-171 Rev A is specifically for third-party assessments, or in addition to self-assessment. They just took this out. But I'm still going to rely on it because it was in the original. It shows you the thinking. The 3 assessment methods are still in the standard. They just took out this paragraph explaining why you would choose them. But again, 800-171 is based on self-assessment, not for a third-party assessment. So what happens now when we hand this standard over to the CMMC scheme, all right, and you've got third parties determining now? A third party, in other words, your C3PAO is going to come into your company and audit you, and they will be the ones deciding which of these three methods. So let's take a look at these. Examine now is simply reviewing records and SOPs, all right? They're going to look at your procedures and your records. And you know what? That's like really cheap. It's really cheap to do that. It doesn't cost anything. I sit down at a desk, and it can be done remotely. You hand me your procedures and I read them. Interviewing is talking to people. That's also super cheap. I'm just going to sit there in the conference room, or I'm going to get on Teams or whatever. I'm going to talk to your people. Doesn't require anything particular of me. What's the bad one? Testing. Testing is insanely expensive. Now, mind you, the C3PAO is going to have to do those tests. SP 800-171A is written from the point of view of you as a company are deciding what test you're going to do. So you can decide, again, what's cost effective and what isn't. But now that they handed this over to the C3PAOs, they make that decision. For a C3PAO to ever conduct testing, they're going to have to do the following, and all of this is like super expensive. They're going to have to develop formal test procedures, meaning written documents, SOPs, etc. They're going to have to use specialized test equipment. Okay, we have to trust the equipment. If the equipment is not trustworthy, then the test is invalid. They're going to then have to calibrate that test hardware. If there's hardware in the loop, they have to have that calibrated, and that should be traceable to national standards, right? They're then going to have to rigorously validate those test methods. That means conducting test runs of their test methods before they ever engage with a client to validate and prove that those test methods can be trusted. They're going to have to train the test operators as well. All of that costs the C3PAO a fortune, all right? None of them are doing that I know of. And why? If it's expensive, the C3PAO is not going to get any clients. You, as a company, get to decide which C3PAO you're going to hire. You're going to have a choice. I can hire Joe's Quickie C3PAO that's only going to rely on the other two methods, right, of interview and examine. And they said, we don't do testing because it's too expensive. Or you can hire, like, super complicated C3PAO LLC, and they do testing, and it's going to cost you 100 times more to hire them. Who are you going to hire? The DoD doesn't care. They just want to see your certificate. Everyone is going to hire the cheap guy who does not do testing. No one is going to hire a C3PAO that actually performs testing. So therefore, you've got this. All of the C3PAOs will absolutely do examining because it just requires them to sit at a desk and look at stuff, right? They don't have to have any intellectual capacity. They're just going to read stuff, right? They're all going to interview because they're going to talk, and they're going to blather on all day, just like they do in the ISO audits where they talk about themselves. And it's, they can go out to lunch and eat at Chili's, and they can do that part as well. Nobody's going to do test. Nobody. It's impossible. So the whole thing ensures fraud because these controls should be tested, but we're not going to be able to trust the result of that. So here's the thing. As a result of them not doing testing, this is what you're going to have. You're going to have the ability to get other people's CMMC certifications thrown out, just like those guys, right? Those attorneys who get you out of your traffic tickets. There's tricks on how they do it. They know the rules. They go in and they say, oh, the radar gun wasn't calibrated or the calibration wasn't traceable. And it's all the same tricks. The judge knows that, yeah, okay. So they say, okay, well, you've paid your lawyer, so you've learned your lesson. We won't charge you the ticket, and they throw the ticket out, right? You still wound up paying something. Instead, you paid a lawyer, and the judge throws it out. But they all know the reason is that the test method was not validated. The equipment wasn't calibrated. All of those sort of tricks. Well, that's the same thing here, right? If a C3PO does testing, the testing can be challenged because they didn't meet all those criteria that I mentioned. But likely they're not going to do testing at all, which is another reason to say, well, how did you issue this certificate? You didn't do any testing. All you did was you sat there and talked to people and read their documents. You didn't really verify anything. So that means that the CMMC certifications are going to get thrown out, whether it goes to court or a formal protest or whatever. And guess what? With millions and billions of dollars on the line, you can guarantee that a CMMC award is going to be challenged by your competitor. You get it? Somebody who wanted that contract and now can't get it or lost it for some reason is going to have a new avenue to come in and issue a protest. That protest can be a formal contract protest like you do all the time. Could be in court. Could go to court, right? And say, and it could, and the lawsuit, by the way, would involve the C3PAO, and guess what? These guys, the Cyber AB. The Cyber AB is supposed to oversee all of this. The Cyber AB has put in no rules to govern this. Now, what should be happening is the Cyber AB would put a rule saying the C3PAO must engage testing for certain controls where it obviously makes sense to do so. There are certain controls in CMMC that simply don't make any sense to rely only on looking at a procedure and talking to some dude over Chili's, right? Doesn't make any sense. There are some in there that need to be tested, but the Cyber AB is just interested in collecting money. So they're making it as easy as possible for a C3PAO to get fully accredited and go out and start issuing certificates. This is where the fraud is guaranteed. The Cyber AB could fix this, but they have refused all input on this, and they're simply not. So you have NIST, which is not updating its standard to allow for third-party use. You got the Cyber AB supposed to be layering in additional rules to interpret the NIST standard for third-party use, and they're not doing it either because they're busy selling credentials, right? And so you're rife with fraud. So unfortunately, your assessments are going to be guaranteed to be challenged. If you get one, somebody's going to challenge you for it, right? And you might lose it as a result, because I don't know how these are going to hold up in court. Likewise, too, if you lose a contract and you see your competitor wins it, you're going to have grounds to challenge them on that. So that's how this whole scheme is ensuring fraud rather as opposed to actual cybersecurity.